Hello, everybody, and welcome to 38 Weeks to Go, your weekly podcast about fantasy football. How was Game Week 31 for you? Game Week 31 has been one that has been full of surprises. And the surprises can be reflected in the choice of two players, Haaland and Saka. Now, at this point, you have to remember that the fixtures are coming quick and fast. There are games happening tomorrow, and then there'll be Champions League next week. So managers are going to rotate, and we're starting to see this now. If Pep and Arteta are sure of victories, or rather are confident that they do not need their best players to win a game, we're going to see a lot of rotations now, especially for the teams that are in Europe, because they still have to challenge on multiple fronts. This weekend was a vital reminder of that. Of course, Arteta says that, he tweaked something in the game against Man City, so we weren't getting what we needed from him, and therefore we made him rest. Now, that may be true, but also, if you look at Arsenal's next fixtures, they have Brighton, Bayern Munich, Aston Villa, Bayern Munich. These are 4 critical games. And when you look at Luton and these games, you're like, okay, Luton is where I can rest some players. As for Man City, it's just Pep roulette. He just does this from time to time, and which is why we can't pick a defender from his team without knowing if he will play. It's just the roulette on full display. So on top of not having our preferred captains play, something that was also very important in this game week was the choice of vice captain, and also, I guess, the importance of a bench. I looked at a few of your benches and I saw many of you had zeros on it. So when these unplanned for absences happened, there was nobody to come on. You remove 0 and replace a 0 with a 0. So let this be a lesson to many of us to choose our bench people better, so that at least you're getting a 2 or a 1 even. I mean, anything is more than 0. When making my team, I won't lie, I was a bit confident after having had a reasonable use of my wild card. I didn't really feel like I needed to change my team. I felt like I had the right players. So at the back, I had the Liverpool keeper because I knew that they were going to beat Sheffield. I also had Bradley, Liverpool defender, because, like I said, I was confident that Liverpool would beat Sheffield. I was even more confident that there would be a clean sheet. I made the right call with Ait-Nouri from Wolves, like I told you before. This guy seems to be everywhere, and with absences of a lot of attacking players, a bigger role has been carved out for him, and he ends up sort of looking like a left winger, a Gareth Bale type, although very budget Gareth Bale. I had Ben White, Arsenal clean sheet, good decision. I had Pedro Porro, and he came on only because Haaland didn't play. I had made the right decision in benching him. In the midfield, I had Son. I thought that if Tottenham are to gain anything from this game, it will come through Son. But it's looking like if you want to get something out of that Spurs midfield, Brennan Johnson is the man. I had Salah, who was my captain, and that was a joke. 60 minutes, nothing. He wasn't injured. He was just removed for tactical decisions. I never thought I'd see this day when Salah would be removed as a tactical decision. I'm not sure if there's more going on, but that's all it seems like. He didn't seem injured to me. Yes, Liverpool were doing nothing in that game until those substitutions came on. But who thought Liverpool could get better by removing Salah? Maybe they're looking at a future without him. I'm speculating too much from fantasy, but it was surprising that he would be removed. But I guess that's the theme of this weekend. There's no player bigger than the club, and there's no player too big to fail. I took a gamble with Havertz, and he delivered. He gave me 5 points. But the biggest delivery of my team this weekend was Palmer. 20 points. I am not sure if you saw that game, but if you're a Man U fan, you must be disappointed. I wouldn't be surprised if Twitter is alight with a Ten Hag out. That game was 3-2 with 90 minutes gone. 3-2. And then 2 goals in quick succession. 1 a penalty, and the other it seemed like Manu had just slept, and they just backed off Palma. The goal was deflected in, but still, it was a heartbreak. The older Manu fans used to be fans of extra time, and even used to be dubbed Fergie time. Now, I'm not sure they're going to be looking at extra time with fondness. Up top, I initially had Muniz, Solanke, and Haaland, but as you all know, Haaland didn't play. So, off the bench comes on my boy Porro to give me 2. Also, I didn't mention that Bradley gave me 0. He scored an own goal. So, an own goal gives you -2, so that was painful, especially considering he got a bonus last week. I was a bit surprised that Solanke didn't score, but not that surprised that Muniz did not score. He doesn't score away from home. So I had low expectations for him. The most exciting game of this game week 31 was Chelsea 4, Man United 3. It was the last game of the game week, and it was the rare situation of you save the best game for last. Chelsea went 2-0 up very quickly. Gallagher scored off a weird deflection. Then Anthony brought Cucurella down. Palmer steps up, penalty. Then Caicedo, who's had a horrible first season at Chelsea, gave the ball away, and Garnacho scored. Garnacho was really good in this game. And then, out of nowhere, Man United get the ball, cross the ball. Fernandes is at the back of the post, and he scores. So you know Jeremiah Obiri is laughing all the way to the bank. So the teams go in level at the half. Early in the first half, a good cross comes, and Garnacho scores with a header, 3-2. And they've done an amazing comeback. Enter 90th minute. Madueke is brought down by Dalot in the box. Cole Palmer steps up. Goal. Chelsea seem to have found their Lampard successor. At this point, I was just happy that we didn't lose the game. And then a few minutes later, Horner, Palmer is open. He takes a shot, it deflects in. 4-3. And of course, that means Palmer has a hat-trick. 20 points. The assists were from Cucurella, Enzo, and Madueke. Palmer got all the bonus points. Garnacho got 2. Fernandes got 1. Man City also trounced Aston Villa. 4-1. I know they were missing Watkins, but goodness. Man City had decided to rest Haaland, De Bruyne, and Stones. So you would think, where would the goals come from? Well, it turns out Foden, who's having a really good breakout season, was the man. Hat-trick. And also, it must be said, Aston Villa were missing the number 1 keeper, Mr. Emiliano Martinez. And if you look at the goals that Foden scored, the hat-trick, you would think he was shooting into an empty net. The keeper barely reacted to any of the goals. Like, barely. I've never seen a hat-trick where the keeper doesn't move. It's almost like they got a civilian to be a goalkeeper for that game. And this is where the depth between the two teams shows, in that Man City can afford to not play De Bruyne or Haaland, and it's not a problem. Whilst Aston Villa, without Watkins and Martinez, don't seem to be able to mount much of a challenge, either defensively or offensively, even though John Duran did score. Apart from that, from a team performance perspective, there wasn't really much of a disappointment. I don't know if Brentford nil, Brighton nil is a disappointment. I don't think so. Arsenal only winning 2-0, maybe that's a disappointment. Newcastle not defeating Everton convincingly, that might be a disappointment. Yeah, there wasn't really a glowing disappointment this game week. From a team perspective, that is. From an individual perspective, of course, there were so many. The rotations really killed us. This game week only had 3 clean sheets. Bournemouth 1, Crystal Palace 0, Arsenal 2, Luton 0, Brentford 0, Brighton 0. At the top, there were 2 top performers this week, and you already know who they were. Palmer with 20 and Foden with 20. I'm really thankful that Pep let Palmer go, because I can't imagine a midfield of Foden and Palmer at City. That would have been too dominant. So, those 2 had 20. Then Garnacho had 14, Gibbs White had 13, and rounding up the top 5 was Rodri, from City with 12. The top goalkeeping performance was Flecken, who had 11 points. He got a bonus and he had 6 saves, so you can tell that he really did his best to keep Brighton out. Number 2 was Bournemouth's keeper Neto. He had 7 points. Number 3 was Raya from Arsenal with 6, Verbruggen from Brighton with 6, and Jose Sa with 4 from Wolves. When it comes to the defenders, Zuma was number 1. He had 10. Number 2 was Zinchenko, tied with Smith and Hall from Newcastle, Smith from Bournemouth. They all had 9. And in number 5 we had a tie, Collins from Brentford, Ait Nouri from Wolves. Midfield was king, as it has been this season. Palmer and Foden tied at the top with 20. Then you have Garnacho just below them with 14. Gibbs-White, who was immense in the Forest winner over Fulham, had 13. And rounding up the 5 was Rodrigo with 12. Forwards were just meh. Gakpo, Isak and Wood were tied for 8. So that's the first 3 gone. Then 4 and 5 was John Duran and Timo Werner with 7. Here are some facts over this game week. Since returning from a Gameweek 19 suspension, Cole Palmer has only blanked away to Liverpool and Man City. He has picked up 99 points. He now has more double-digit hauls than any other player this season. He has 9. McAllister continues to be impressive. He has returned in his last 6 games, 3 goals, 4 assists, and 8 bonus points. And that has given him 47 points. And that is more than the rest of his season put together. So it's safe to say that he has adjusted to life at Liverpool now. Globally, the most brought-in players this game week were Foden, Isak, Ait Nouri, Salah, and Ben White. When it comes to transfers out, Watkins, Areola, Saka, Trippier, and De Bruyne were the top 5. With a whopping 88.75%, Mohamed Salah was the most captained player this week. With 4.2%, Haaland was the second most popular captain this week. And in third place, it was Arsenal's golden boy Saka. So if you had anybody but those 3, well done, because those most popular people were the worst captain choices this week. And the people who benefited the most from this were people who had strong vice captains. Like the guy who had the team of the week. He had triple captain Haaland against Villa, but he did not play. So who was his vice captain? Fucking Palmer. So that's how he got 60 points from Palmer for a whopping 143 points. We are approaching game week 34 and it's a double game week. Liverpool have a double game week, Man U, Everton, Bournemouth and Chelsea, along with Wolves and Newcastle. The best 5 players this season in terms of value and performance are Cole Palmer, who has 26.6 points per million, Areola, 24.7 points per million, Douglas Luiz, 24.6, Anthony Gordon, 23.0, and Carlton Morris, 22.9. Basically, these guys have overperformed according to their value, like 5.0, and he's like the best midfielder, that kind of logic. Those are the top 5. Something funny, Turner, a goalkeeper, got -1. He did not play. He just got a yellow card. And so imagine if he's your sub and your keeper did not play. When it comes to our group, the most owned players are Palmer, number 1, owned by 80% of our group. Haaland, number 2, owned by 68%. Son, owned by 60%, tied with Saka. Salah, 56%. Solanke, 52%. Those are the most popular signings in our group. In our group, the most brought-in players are Isak, brought in by 7. Salah, brought in by 2. Raya, Porro, and Diaz also brought in by 2. And then Van Heck, brought in by 1 person. Most transfers out, Watkins, removed by 8. Matty Cash, I'm honestly surprised that people still had Matty Cash. But anyway, 3 of you have removed him. Areola, removed by 2. Bailey as well. Foden removed by 2 as well. I am very sorry for you too. Gross and Morris. Now, the average game week points this week was 47. If you got more than 47, well done. However, the average for our group was 57.9. So if you got 57 and above, well done. You were doing well in our group. 19 over 25 of us got over the global weekly average. The top player this week was no other than Tommy Oladipo, who got a whopping massive 96 points. Well done, Tommy. What's even more impressive is that both of his keepers didn't even play. Remember how I was saying a little earlier that if you didn't captain Salah, Haaland, or Saka, you were the real MVP? Well, unless you captain Son, then you just really as miserable as the rest of us. But Tommy was one of those winners. His captain was Palmer. 40 points. 40 points. Well done. Then he had Foden, who had 20 points. And then he had Garnacho, who had 14 points. Then he had Isak, who had 8 points. And White, who had 6 points. And if you remember listening to his interview, he has been really sold on Isak this season. So he has been eating from him. Then outside that, Doughty 1, Kufal 2, Solanke 2, and Braithwaite 2. And his keeper, Martinez, didn't play, he was ill. And Areola is out. He had 0. Following Tommy, number 2 was Goodness Gracious Me. He had 84 points. Tied for 3rd and 4th is Why Are You Running? And Hans Gruber. 76 points apiece. And rounding up the top 5 was Washira Gitahi, who has 75 points. Looking at Leon's team, his points were very interesting. He had captained Palmer, who gave him 40 points. Then he had McAllister, who gave him 10. Well done on bringing McAllister. I've noticed that this Leon guy isn't afraid to make tough decisions. Then he had Kai Havertz with 5, Bowen with 5, and then White with 6, Isak with 8, Muniz 2, Son 2, Romero 1, Udoji 2. He really banked on Tottenham getting a clean sheet. And then Pickford 3. And I'm just reading out his team because it's very different from Tommy's. You can see that he got 84 points. Just proof that there are very many ways to skin a cat. On the other end, you have a guy like, why are you running Mr. Leon? His points, he had both Palmer and Foden, 40 points straight. Then he had Luis Diaz, and he had 2 Arsenal defenders, Gabriel and Saliba, 6 and 7 respectively. Braithwaite gave him 2, Virgil van Dijk gave him 2, Solanke gave him 2, and Timo Werner gave him 7. So you see, that's 76 points, and it's a different build. Dubravka was his keeper, who gave him 2. There are many ways to win at this game. Just see what you're seeing and trust in yourself. At the top of the table, we have Alexander Mutune, who is still up top. He has 1885 points. He got 53 this week. Saka and Watkins did not play, but he had put Rodrigo at the back end of his bench, so 12 points at the bench, and he got 53. That's painful, because the people who came on got 2-2. However, his early work is still doing the work for him. He has a healthy 23-point lead. It used to be 40, so it's coming down slowly. He needs to hang in there, don't bottle it. Number 2 is still Vic City. He got 61 points, which gives him a total of 1862, which is just roughly 23 points behind Mr. Mutune. He got 61 points, but he was really fortunate. Garnacho was his first sub. You see the difference between him and Mutune is that Garnacho was his first sub. 14 points came on when Saka did not play. Well done. And this goes back to the point I was trying to make earlier. Try to have a bench that will play. And then arrange your bench in the order that you would like them to come in. That is also very important. And you can see the difference between Vic and Tune. Leon maintains his position in number 3 with 84 points, and he got 1851. The other Leon, Why Are You Running? Is number 4 with 1845 points. He's just 6 points behind number 3, and number 3 is about 22 points, 21 points behind number 2. So there's still a race there. There's a double game week coming up. anything can happen. Now, the top four are in their own league right now. And then you have number 5, who is Eli. He has got 1794 points. And Tom is really coming for him. He's 20 points behind him and he has 1773 points. Then number 7 to 10 is separated by 10 points. Number 11 to 15 is separated by about 30 points. Number 15 to number 19 is a 30-point gap. At the bottom, Melvin Kathurima, Mount Freemasons, gaining grounds on Jeremiah Obey because he captained Fernandez, while Jeremiah captained Haaland. Whoever thought that day would come, and I was joking about it last week. However, something interesting that I've noticed with Jeremiah Obey's team is that he is being punished by the system. You see, Haaland was his captain, and it has not moved to his vice captain. And when I look at his team, the only thing that makes sense to me is that he has Ivan Perisic in his backline. If you ever needed proof that somebody doesn't make his team, he has Ivan Perisic in his backline, who left to Hajduk Split in January. So it seems like the system is not going to allow him to have the automatic captain roll over to vice captain if your captain doesn't play feature. So Melvin is at the bottom with 1288, and Jeremiah is just 4 points ahead of him at 1292. So that's the bottom tier. So that one's just between those two. Then at number 23, you have Jibril, who got 61 points with 1523. Then you have Moses Tim Kubwa, who had 1546. And number 21, Mr. Kimeu, who had 1598. So between number 23 and number 21, it's about 70 points. And then from number 21 to number 19 is 50 points. So the group has broken into different sections. Nothing is set in stone, but it seems like those are the groups that are competing with each other right now. This has been the business end of the season, and the games are coming quick and fast. It almost feels like December, because from the weekend, we had this game week, and now 1 day break, and games resume tomorrow. So as you can imagine, I can't even attempt to do an interview with anybody, because there's just no time. I'm sorry for all of you guys who have done great things. Congratulations and keep it up. Fixtures. Looking at the next game week, you have to remember that there's Europe coming in the midweek. So it means a lot of the teams that are playing in Europe will be playing on Saturday. So, first game of the week, Manchester City versus Crystal Palace. Now, of course, you know Manchester City have a favorable head-to-head against Crystal Palace. The real question this week will be, who do you captain, and will your captain actually play? That is a lesson that we've learned from the last week. We have Europe now. Who will play for Manchester City? I would advise you to steer clear of captaining anybody really from that team. They will win this game, or at least they're favored to. But will KDB play? I don't know. Will Haaland play? I don't know. Will Foden play? Who knows? You're probably safe banking on Ortega as the keeper. If Ederson isn't back, you know? It's hard to know this thing, because if Ederson's back, he's definitely going to play so that he can sort of get match fitness for Real Madrid, because Real Madrid is Real Madrid. Will Haaland play? Probably in some capacity. I think would want him sharp. But do you want to risk injury ahead of a game that big? These are the questions that you'll be thinking about as you're making your team. If I'm honest, you're probably better off going with like Isak or Solanke. That kind of a captain choice, because you know it's going to be fine. You know those players will play. So, of course, I would recommend Haaland, Foden, Rodri. Rodri will play. Maybe Rodri captain? This is the kind of game I believe Doku will play, because he isn't that important. And the defender of your choice. Continue with the roulette that you have been currently doing. From the Crystal Palace perspective, you have Eze and Mateta. That's about it. Moving on to Aston Villa versus Brentford. If you're looking for a differential, John Duran is your man. It's true that Watkins may be back, but it's a hamstring. the odds are that they'll take some more time. John Duran will be a good differential to have. Apart from that, you should go for the usual suspects that you already have. Douglas Luiz, Diaby, Bailey. Aston Villa defense is quite shaky right now, like most other people's defense that are not named Arsenal. Be careful with that. From Brentford, it seems like maybe with Brentford, the two most likely people to score are Wissa and Aya, not the other guys. Third choice would be Mope. Those are the people who have scored in their last 5 games. Nobody else has scored for Brentford in their last 5 games. Brentford, Crystal Palace, Everton are very lucky in that Luton, Burnley and Sheffield have been poor this season because they would be straight up in a relegation battle if it wasn't for that. Probably a little bit harsh on Luton, but the results are the results. Everton and Burnley, just speaking of teams that are in relegation form. Having said that, Burnley are in better form than Everton. In the last 5 matches, Burnley have drawn 3, won 1, and lost 1. Who would have ever thought? I feel like Burnley and Sheffield and Luton have figured out something about how to play in the Premier League, but it has been too late. If they started how they've been playing the last 5 games, I believe they would have had a higher points tally at this point. Maybe they'll do better if they make it back up. Everton's recent form is 3 losses and 2 draws. Everton really need to win this game. They really need to put some separation between them and the relegation places. Everton do have a favourable record against them. And if you're looking for a clean sheet this weekend, this is a place where you sort of have a Mikolenko or a Tarkowski. This is when they perform. It's really hard to recommend Everton players moving forward. I mean, Dominic Calvert-Lewin scored recently in the 1-1 draw against Newcastle, but that was his first goal in like 24 games. So it's really not great looking at their strikers. Probably if you really want to get into this fixture, I would suggest going for a defender. Maybe if you have a Pickford, bring him on, or Mikolenko, Tarkowski, and then maybe Doucouré or Beto. For Burnley, you have Fofana and Brun Larsen, those two. Having said that, Burnley haven't won an away match in the last 7 games. Burnley haven't kept a clean sheet in 14 matches. Everton haven't kept a clean sheet in 8 matches and haven't won a match in 10 attempts. So for one of these teams, one of these records is going to change. Newcastle versus Fulham. The most important thing to note is that Newcastle haven't lost to Fulham in their last 8 meetings. So I don't know what they're going to do because Muniz scores at home. So Muniz is going to score. But on a more serious note, Eddie Howe is an interesting manager because he keeps lying about Trippier's availability. Every weekend he says, oh, he's going to be back. And I know if there are some of you who are following that news, he has been misleading you this whole time. So I would encourage you to get rid of him if you don't have him until he actually plays and then actually performs. Gordon will be back from suspension, and that should add a dimension of attack that they were lacking in the previous game. Isak is on good form, and if you remember last week I told you about his goal to minute ratio scoring. He is good. Probably the most efficient striker right now in the Premier League. So he should be somebody you should consider bringing in. On the Fulham side, of course, you have to have Muniz. And then if you have to get more, you can consider Pereira, Willian, Iwobi, and maybe one of the wing-backs. Luton versus Bournemouth. I won't lie. I believe Luton versus Bournemouth is going to be a high-scoring fixture. Luton couldn't score this time round against Arsenal, even though they had previously scored against them. I don't hold that against them. Arsenal are the best at keeping clean sheets this season. Bournemouth are not the best, and therefore they can be gotten at. Luton haven't kept a clean sheet in 11 matches, and they haven't won a match in 11 matches as well. Bournemouth haven't lost in 5 games. So when you put in a team that can't keep a clean sheet and a team that hasn't lost in 5 matches, what does that mean for you? Goals. There are going to be goals in this game. Now, from Bournemouth, you know, Solanke, maybe Semenyo, Kluivert, Billing, Tavernier. So many options. If you believe that they'll keep another clean sheet, Neto, Zambarani, Kelly. On the Luton side, Carlton Morris, Okpene, Barkley, possibly Doughty for his attacking returns, not his defensive returns. Wolves versus West Ham. Cunha is back. Wolves haven't kept a clean sheet in 5 matches. Wolves and West Ham have not drawn any of their last 13 matches. So do you know what that means? There is going to be a winner. West Ham have conceded the most penalties this season, with 9, which means they make not so great decisions at the back. If you're getting Wolves players, these are the only 3 you should consider: Cunha, Ait Nouri, and Sarabia. If you're considering West Ham players, you should think of Kudus, Bowen, Paqueta, and Antonio. Antonio has been getting many chances this week. If you've watched him the last 2 game weeks, he missed a sitter against Tottenham, but he scored that same goal against Spurs. So he will get opportunities. He could be a differential. Brighton versus Arsenal. The most important thing you should know about this fixture is that they have not drawn any of their last 5 matches against each other. Brighton are playing at home. They have been unbeaten in their last 14 home games. Now, on the flip side, Arsenal are ranked number 1 away from home, so they're most likely to win away from home than any other team in the Premier League. They have also kept the most clean sheets this season, and they have scored the most goals this season. So, what does that mean? If Brighton get their shooting boots together, this game will have many goals. It could be high scoring. However, Brighton have not been great of late. In their last 8 games, though they have some victories, they have failed to score more than 1 goal. So it seems like if Brighton are to win this game, they have to win 1-0. But Arsenal are not that kind of a team. So I am thinking that this game may not be the one where Brighton find their shooting boots. I am going to go with Arsenal. But Arsenal have Bayern, their nemesis. Bayern have totally outperformed Arsenal in their last, I don't even know how many fixtures. So with that in mind, there may be a squad rotation in the way there was earlier this week. And not knowing who will play, that combination could prove to be good for Brighton. So having said that, you know that the most important thing in Arsenal is their defense. That is probably the safest place to invest in, as that will be subject to the least amount of rotation. So if you're going to be in Arsenal defenders, just stick with the ones you have, because at this point you already know who is working for you, and just stay true to that. The only real question comes at left back, and it's, will Kiwior play or will Zinchenko play? That is the only real question. Every other position is sorted. You have Saliba, Gabriel, Ben White, and Raya. Saka may or may not play, it's not clear. Or maybe this is a kind of game where they'll play 50 minutes, 60 minutes. They try to hit hard by halftime so they can rest. It'll be very interesting to see how they approach this. In the midfield, it seemed Odegaard and Havertz will be the ones to play. So those would be the safest choices. For Brighton, you really are choosing Gross, Welbeck, and maybe Dunk. The marquee match of the week comes from Manchester United versus Liverpool. Liverpool were not great against Sheffield. They won that match, but they were unconvincing. Salah was probably being rested for this game. Man United recently beat Liverpool in that 4-3 thriller. So this will be a very entertaining game. From a Manchester United perspective, Garnacho, he really should be your first pick. Then if you have to choose 2 players from Manchester United, maybe Højlund, and then the rest is up to you. From a Liverpool perspective, McAllister has been amazing. I would advise you to just put in McAllister now and just close your eyes. Yes, he's not a big name. Just get over it. Put him in your team. After that, you have Salah, Luis Diaz, and maybe a defender if you think they'll keep a clean sheet. Liverpool are in Europe, but I don't think that should affect their choices. It's not like they're playing Bayern Munich or Real Madrid. They're playing Atalanta. So if you believe Salah will be good, this might be the game to retain his captaincy. Salah tends to score in this fixture, so you shouldn't be discouraged from selecting him. In their last fixtures, in the last 6 fixtures, he has scored 8 goals against them, just in case you're wondering about the numbers. Now that I think about it, this is a kind of game where you would like to have Rashford if you're looking into my new players. Outside Garnacho, of course, because Rashford tends to score in big games for no reason. Sheffield United versus Chelsea. Sheffield gave a very encouraging performance against Liverpool. They haven't been the whipping boys that they have been in the past. They have also figured something out. They lost 3-1 to Liverpool, but they drew with Sheffield 3-3. They drew 2-2 with Bournemouth. They lost 6-0 to Sheffield and lost 1-0 to Wolves. I've read those results out to show that they are not a walkover. They lose, but they have been respectable of late. So basically, what I'm saying is don't underestimate them. Having said that, I know I've just read the stat that Salah scored 8 goals against Man U in 6 games, but this seems like an easy Palmer captain choice here for many of you, and I wouldn't blame you. This is a kind of game where you're like, okay, let me bring in Gusto, a Chelsea defender, or Disasi, and then you have Palmer, and literally after that it's dealer's choice. I would go with Conor Gallagher, but you can do with anyone else as you want. Now, Sheffield haven't kept a clean sheet in 11 matches. They haven't won in 6 games. Chelsea have won the most penalties this season. I mean, the way they run, and they just won 2 yesterday. Now, on top of that, they haven't kept a clean sheet in 12 matches. So, all this hype about Gusto and defenders, they don't keep clean sheets. Chelsea are proper mid-table team. Proper mid-table. Mid-table. Sink that into your heads. Sink that into your heads, because a lot of you are going to be seeing clean sheets. They haven't kept one in 12 games. If you're choosing Sheffield players, Bertrand Diaz and McBurney and McAtee. That's it. Finally, we will have Tottenham Hotspur versus Nottingham Forest. Nottingham Forest were very impressive against Fulham. First of all, it must be said, Fulham are horrible away from home. They're better at home. But anyway, that game was over in the first half hour of the game. First half, 3-0, done. As you can imagine, Spurs have a better head-to-head record against them. The last time they played, Richarlison and Królewski scored. So I would encourage Son, Królewski. Richarlison may or may not play, it's not clear. If you're looking to get into Forest, the best bet is probably Morgan Gibbs-White and Chris Wood. Then your choice of Callum Hudson-Odoi, who scored, and probably Elanga. In fact, if you listen to the last pod, a lot of the people I spoke about were really the key players for their teams. It's just a matter of which one fits with your budget and what you're trying to do. Nottingham Forest haven't kept a clean sheet in their last 7 matches, and they haven't won an away game in their last 6 matches. So everything is ringing Spurs right now. And if you're like me and you had your Spurs defenders on the bench, or if you're like Leon and you have like 2 Spurs defenders, I think this is a time to bring them out. Now, when it comes to choosing a captain, you can choose a Spurs player. It's just a matter of who your poison is. Son has been a bit disappointing of late, so I wouldn't really encourage him over somebody like Palmer, who has been in great form recently. Salah is an option. He has been scoring against Manchester United. He had a bad game yesterday, but the good players forget about that and they carry on, and he will recover. You could also look at Bournemouth versus Luton and gamble on Solanke. You could look at Newcastle Fulham and look at Isak again, or maybe even Muniz if you're feeling like he will score at home like he has been doing. And then if you look at Man City, you can try Phil Foden. And if you're going to go for an Arsenal player against Brighton, maybe Odegaard, in case Saka doesn't play. And those are just a few of my thoughts. Anyway, I hope you are all well. The matches are coming quick and fast. Make your team for tomorrow. At least this one you're probably better prepared for. All right. I hope you have a great weekend. See you soon. Bye.